All right, welcome to Alternative Paths to an Analytics Career session with Sandra Martin and Renee Ernst. Now, I have been looking forward to this session for a while now, and let me introduce about Sandra and Renee first. Sandra Martin has 30 years of experience delivering software through multiple technologies, software development lifecycle methods, globally distributed teams, and lifelong learning strategies. Renee is a data scientist with Imperfect Food. You already heard a ton about Renee, so I'm not going to go into too many details. But in this session, this will be an interactive session around career change focused on those looking to get into an analytics role. Given that the field is so broad, they will be talking about some different parts in the analytics as well as some suggestions on training, education for those looking to get into those areas. We will also discuss, they will also discuss their own quite different parts into the analytics. Then they will transition into Q&A at the end. Now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Sandra and Renee. So it's so wonderful to have you here at our very first Mini Analytics conference.
It's great to be here. And I think I will just start with the next slide right away. So the first thing you're going to notice is I usually go by Sandy Martin. I always use my formal name, and when I fill things out, and sometimes I forget. But you also see that I have one title in the list of people, and I have a new title now. I'm the Senior Director for Data Lake Engineering, and what that means for Thomson Reuters is building a lake using Snowflake, one of our providers here today, to bring together all of our business data to make it available for analytics. And what Renee and I did was go through just a little bit more information about ourselves as far as it pertains to this topic of being in the analytics field or data science. I'm a lifelong learner. You know, I started out reading a lot of books when I was little, and it just kept going through the rest of my career. I've been involved in a lot of different technologies, all the way from mainframes to doing analytics. And if I used 3 words to describe myself, it'd be engineer, a team builder, and I do program delivery. I've learned about 6 coding languages. I've been through a couple stats tools, or worked with a few stats tools, and recently completed the graduate certificate in business analytics. And so I got to tap into Excel modeling, Power BI, and Tableau as I completed that certificate. Things about me, things I like to do. I like to hike, I like to bike, and I quilt. And unfortunately, you can't see that behind me. But next time, maybe I'll get my camera right or the room right. So Renee, I'm going to go to the next slide. You want to introduce yourself anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. So that got really blurry in that picture. I look like I've got blacked out eyes. I'm Renee Ernst. I am a data scientist at Imperfect Foods. I say I'm forever curious because I'm always wanting to dig in and ask questions. I think my coworkers could say I am always asking a ton of questions. I really enjoy the data field because it allows you really to feed that curiosity, that constantly wanting to learn, constantly having questions, and that's part of what I love so much about it. My background is I originally was in the social sciences. I thought I wanted to be an academic, so that's why I ended up getting a PhD in social psychology and then statistics. And it was kind of an accident through my grad school how much I found how much I loved, collecting data, doing research, and using data to answer questions. And that's how I ended up going down my current path. I am a big fan of Python, which if you talk to me about coding languages and that type of thing, that's definitely what I'm into. I also think of myself as more of a full stack data scientist in the sense that like I really enjoy owning the full end to end of a project. Everything from the data collection, cleaning, data pipelining process, all the way to like building APIs and getting my models into production for live predictions. So I just really love that entire process and getting to learn all the intricacies of the technology around it. And then outside of work, I do volunteer work such as this, helping organize MinneWiADS conferences. I've done 4 or 5 of these now. And then I'm an avid coffee drinker, and I also like to knit. I've knit the sweater I'm wearing here today, actually. So I guess Sandy and I are both in the fiber arts for our fans. Maybe there's something else going on in common here. But also, just so you guys know, there's a poll we have open right now too, just asking you guys a little bit about where you are in an analytics journey too.
So Renee and I got connected through, I submitted a topic, and you may have seen it, called Old Dog New Tricks, and not a reference necessarily to my age, but just the idea that you're switching from one field to another. And as we started talking about what we wanted to talk about in this presentation, in this time slot, because we wanted to be more discussion and not just presentation, one of the things we wanted to cover is when you look at the analytics field, as I know as I started to look at it and where my work was going with understanding data and building a data lake, I felt like there were so many things to learn. Could I try to compartmentalize them and figure out what it meant to be in the analytics field, and came up with these types of skill sets. The first one is actually really the middle one, and it's got the little cowboy there, data wrangling. So many companies have data in so many different places, and in order to do the analytics that you need to do that benefit the company, that give you those insights, you need to pull data from multiple different sources in multiple different ways. And so some of the skills for data wrangling are very specialized, and you can end up finding jobs that are just about data wrangling. So you need to know things like big data. You need to know what a data model is. You need to understand what it means to ETL, extract, transform, and load data. And the skill sets or the technologies that often go with that data wrangling are SQL, Python, Spark, and Scala. So that's about gathering and making our data usable. And then you can look at analytics in maybe 2 different categories, or this is how Renee and I looked at it. And if we start from the left, I'll credit Renee with those nifty lines at the bottom. They're very descriptive, and they really help us understand the different types. Data statistics is information, so business intelligence. It's a lot of the business intelligence work that goes on is looking at your financial data from a company, so your accounts receivable, your marketing data, knowing who came in and what they hit and what they clicked and where they went. And your product usage information, a lot of that fits in your business intelligence space. And you can bring that together, do some data wrangling, and use business intelligence tools like Tableau or Power BI or other types of reporting tools that will generate reports over a month, every month, or every minute, or every week. And a lot of the technologies that are typically used in that space are ones that support statistics like R and SAS, and SQL to get your data, and Python to for the code that you might use to generate some of those reports. On the other side of the equation, or on the analytics spectrum, I guess, is more models that are built into our systems and processes, so that artificial intelligence and machine learning that's going on. And you see some of the same skills there, but in this space, you really need to understand software engineering. And what that means is, for instance, I listened to the presentation today on building R libraries. And it's a lot of those steps. You need to have a documentation on what you're doing. That makes it that helps you break down the work, and it helps you figure out what step to take first and how to test it and get it into production. So that's a very important part of being able to work in the artificial intelligence and machine learning field. And Renee, is there anything you wanted to say beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a lot of this is it's a spectrum, right? People can wear multiple hats, and there's a lot of different ways to get into this field. You can be somebody who really wants to focus in on one particular part of this area, or maybe be more of a generalist where you're working across them, and that's okay. I think, you know, and as we go through and we start talking more in this session, talking a little bit more about like when you're first getting in, trying to figure out which one of these you might want to start out in, or great ways to get experience, and that we'll definitely be talking about that as well. But yeah, just think about it as this is one of those fields that's constantly growing and evolving and changing. So like really trying to like hard pigeonhole what a given role is very difficult. But yeah, there's such a spectrum, and it really depends on what company you're working out and what their needs are. But yeah, a lot of great things that can be done.
Definitely. So then if you're one of those, and I can't see the poll, Renee, are you able to see the poll? Do you want to, do we have any results from that before we talk about education?
Yeah, we do. It looks like we've got a little bit of a mix here. We've got about 60% of people say that they are currently working in an analytics or data science position. And then about 25% have not trained in it at all yet, it sounds like, and they're just looking to get into an analytics field. And about another 16% are in a technology position but wanting to transition to analytics. So definitely some variety here.
Okay, great. So that lends some view on how to talk about the education. So if we have some understanding of what types of skills are found out in the analytics field and what types of how they fit into different jobs, and as Renee said, you can find positions that go across all these three areas or concentrate in an area. So then what do I do to get an education in analytics? And you don't have to be a technologist to do it. In fact, I have a son who graduated from Hamlin just about a year ago in December with an economics degree. Oh my gosh! As I worked through my graduate certificate and had 2 stats class, he was way far ahead of me in the stats area, but I was way far ahead of him in using R and Python and things like that. So you don't have to go into analytics having necessarily a technology background, but you have to want to learn some of that technology background. If you just start with a statistics background, you're often way ahead of a lot of the people who want to be in the analytics field. But there are different types of analytics education, and it kind of depends on where you start with your background, whether you have that technology degree or whether you have that statistics effort or statistics background. And these are the 3 types that Renee and I came up with. There's probably different views on this or different slices. One of them is just product certifications. So if you're a technologist already in the field, or you're someone like my son has an economics degree and understands stats and has kind of a propensity to be able to learn technology, you could go out to some product certifications and we'll talk about types of certifications, more details a little bit later on. Maybe you want to learn how to do stats in AWS versus Azure. So that's a cloud provider type of certification. You can get certifications in different kinds of statistics apps, and there are certified professionals, and we can talk about that a little bit more on another slide, but there are programs where you go through a different learning series, and it then you take a test, and then it calls you you're allowed to call yourself a certified analytics professional. That's one of them. You can go to a lot of universities offering certifications now, and that's actually very recent. It used to be you if you wanted to get into analytics, you need to go for a full master's program. And that's a 2, 3, 4-year journey, depending on how much time you have to spend in classes. And I was really glad to see about a year or so ago, the U of M was one of the first ones to offer a 12-week intensive program on analytics education. Really good for the person who has a technology background and just needs to learn the specific technologies or get an understanding of stats in order to be qualified for an analytics type job. So it's really good to see these certifications popping up, because I don't think you need the full base of a background of a master's program necessarily to work in analytics. And finally, that there is always the option to get a master's degree, undergraduate or graduate, in data science or business intelligence. I know that University of St. Thomas and University of Minnesota offer these degrees. There are other universities that certainly do that, just the two that I know of right now. Renee, any further comments there?
Yeah, just that, there's a lot of different options here in terms of like getting those credentials that you need to first kind of get your foot in the door with jobs, and stand out in terms of like them knowing that you have the skills. And I'm not sure if we talk about it in a future slide or not, but I think also depending on what field you're going into, there's a lot about focus on a portfolio. So for example, for data science, a lot of a great way to get into that field is by, especially as you're starting to take classes, getting everything out on GitHub and having it publicly available so that people can see the type of work that you can do, and it's more tangible that way. But we actually have a ton of questions here so far, so maybe what we should do is kind of sidetrack for just a little bit and start answering some of these questions, and then maybe go back and forth depending on what does that sound good?
Sounds good. I can't see them, Renee, because of the way I have them. I have
No
this shared, but please go ahead.
Sure. So, so we've got some questions here about people who are recently graduating. So, for example, Anna here says, I'm a recent data analytics graduate with a bachelor's degree and is looking to take their next step and trying to get into the field with not a lot of experience, and seeing a couple similar questions like that and what our recommendations are. Personally, what I would say is, it again kind of depends a little bit on which one of those areas you really want to focus on. So are you really focused on like, I want to do data viz and, really that like digging deep into data and like finding information and then presenting that in a visual format or in a format for others to ingest? Or are you more really somebody who likes to tinker in and maybe like create like data flows and do like more that engineering side? Or are you somebody who is very well trained in like statistics and machine learning and want to get into data science? I would say either way, I know that in this field, getting that first job is the hardest thing to do. Once you get your foot in the door and you've started proving yourself, it seems like all of a sudden recruiters are constantly knocking at your door, but getting that first one is very difficult. Personally, I found that people have a lot of success maybe going into especially if they don't have any business experience yet, going into a more entry level data analysis type role where they're able to learn things, really like learn what business data actually looks like, learn SQL in a real world environment. I find those are often great first roles. They might not be what you ultimately end up wanting to do, but like for myself, I knew I wanted to go into data science. I knew I wanted to go into more heavy modeling. But my first role was working as an analyst, and there was doing some, regression modeling and that type of thing. But, I learned so much experience in that, learned so much in that first role, really focusing on things like, oh, this is what it's like being in industry. This is what this data looks like. This is how I pull it. This is the, querying languages, that type of thing.
The one thing I'd add is I've been noticing out there that there are it's a good time of year to be asking that question. There's internship programs. I've seen one at Target. I've seen one at 3M. So if you're in the local market, I would look into those as a way to get the experience that Renee is talking about that could lead to, proving yourself, proving that you can do this job and benefit a company.
Yeah, it's funny when I was figuring out schools and that type of thing. Something a professor told me once was that it's always great to go to a small school for undergrad because you get a lot of more personalized attention rather than giant classes. And then you want to go to a large school for graduate school so that way you can get a lot of data and collect and do research, and they've got the money for research. And it's almost, I feel like in some ways kind of opposite when you think about your first job, that those large companies often tend to have more of like those internship type of programs that Sandy is talking about that are great and good ways to first get those first jobs where you're really learning about data and getting into it. And then, you know, sometimes you can see some of those at startups, but a lot of times it feels like startups, you know, really need people to jump in on the ground and be able to just run. And so there's less training opportunity, but again, it really depends on the startup. So yeah, but I do see those types of programs, like those internship programs, are really cool, and there's a lot more of those.
And one thing Renee pointed out to me when we were talking about this presentation that I'm going to pull out on that bullet point. She put it up here on independent learning portfolio on GitHub. As someone who interviews and hires people, the more of the work I can see, that's what sells the belief that that person can come in and actually do that work. So if you don't have a portfolio on GitHub, I'd recommend following Renee's recommendation and creating one.
And I would definitely say, on that same note, as somebody who's done a lot of interviewing and looking at resumes, don't put your GitHub on your resume if there's nothing in there that you actually did. If it's just copied from other sources, we'll know. So make sure it's your own original content. So definitely make sure you've got some stuff in there that you wrote and you did, so that way you're really showing off your skills rather than it simply being cloned of other people's work. Yeah. And then
Renee, next one.
Yeah, next question. So somebody here, Jacqueline's saying they have a lot of experience working as an analyst, looking forward to get more skilled in coding and to take experience to the next level. And they're asking if there's any good resources for increasing skills in Python and R. And on this slide here, we actually have quite a good, you know, amount of resources. I find personally, in my opinion, the best way to really learn these skills is by taking a project on. So, and that's sometimes hard because, like, finding something that you're really motivated and want to do when it's like, so like, for example, some of these online courses, the data is really pre-cleaned for you. You don't really have to do much. It's just like kind of plug and play. What I decided to do is I really wanted to do a project where it was a side passion of mine, where then I could, like, nobody else has done it before. So I scraped data from a site that is for knitting, and scraped data and learned how to do that, and then built code on then how to analyze that data. And so it's really kind of if you can find something that you're personally interested about and find a way to get that data, I think it's much easier to use that in a way that you can build something that's really unique and you can show off your skills and that show off that you're really interested in. I think that's a great way to learn some of that. And then, of course, you know, there are some great online courses for programming as well.
And I would take on this, since you're already, this person who asked the question already in the business. For instance, my summer class was Excel modeling, and at first I went into it like, really? I've used Excel for how many years? What am I going to learn? I learned a lot. And my final project, I went to our finance group and got 80,000 records for revenue to do revenue recognition modeling, and looked at seasonality and trends. So there's so many things you can do just inside your business. If you want to take on a Python project, take some of the data you already know and ask your employer what more could be learned from this. You're showing initiative on learning something, and you're showing your employer that you'll put some extra time into advancing some information or a project.
Yeah, when I first started out, I was in SAS and I moved over to Python, and that's something that was really important to me that I wanted to do. And I was at Target at the time, and luckily I had a really, you know, great support from my manager at the time, that I was just like, you know, if I'm really going to learn this, I need to dive in and just do it. And so got support from them. I'm like, I want to do a project fully in Python, even though I know it's going to take me longer than if I did it in SAS. But getting that support to be like, okay, yes, you know, just dive in and fully do it, because that seems like the best way to learn. Yeah.
I would say if you've never done any software engineering, you want to have some basic, it would be worth one of the courses from here to learn some basic things about software engineering, like what's a function and why are there parameters and how do I pass them and how do I do my testing. So I would, if you haven't done any programming, definitely invest in some time to learn about the constructs of programming.
Yeah, and I think we addressed some of these other questions that I'm scrolling through trying to keep up. You know, some of them are things like, you know, what should I be focusing on to get attention and that type of thing. Again, I think that portfolio really gets at that. studying and building skills on SQL and Python, yeah, again, it's really at that's practice, and the portfolio is really helpful. I see a good question here about from Brian. It seems like analytics translator roles seem to be filled by internal business leads who are data minded. Is there a need for analytics translators from outside an organization to help lead projects to maintain a business focus on analytics initiatives? In my opinion, I think I'm not so much sure about having somebody coming outside the organization to do that, because I think having people from inside the organization who truly understand the organization is one of the big benefits there. But I also think that it should be on the part of the technologists to also truly understand their business. To be fully dependent on I only do the technology part and somebody else needs to tell me what they want me to do or to inform me on the business aspect. I find that often you hear about so many data science projects failing, and that's one of the reasons why. It's really important that you invest time to really understand how the business works, and that you have that you can communicate what you're doing, and that you can also take what people are telling you from the business and interpret that into a way you can turn it into something that is technological and solves that problem.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you're very experienced in the technology, you want to get into another company, I think you go into that position saying, I can bring this technology skill to you that you don't have and need. Here's proof that I can understand how the business uses the data or will use the data, and I'm going to learn that when I come in on the job and apply the technology. But I agree with Renee. I don't think it's too hard to separate the two of, well, I know how to write a SQL statement, but I don't know what the data means. You need to be able to do both.
Yeah. Destiny has a great question here. She says that she used to be a data scientist, but decided a couple of years to try out system development. But now she's having a hard time getting back into analytics because she's been pigeonholed as a developer. And has what advice, would we give to get back into the analytics field? I'll say one thing is, honestly, when I've been reviewing, candidate materials, seeing people with a developer background is actually very appealing. One of the things that's often hard to find is we get people who don't seem as much interested in that aspect of it, and that those people who have that background are the best, are often very able to, own a project end to end, which I find exceptionally appealing. I think one way that, and maybe you're already doing this, is maybe framing your resume that really in a way that focuses on the outcomes of the work that you did even as a developer. So for example, you did X, Y, and Z project that led to, a project that increased revenue by such amount. So twisting that, changing that way you describe your development job, almost in adding numbers to it and focusing on the analytics of the outcome of your development work. Yeah. Let's see here. Some people asking about if they've got a Viz background, analytics programs background, and trying to get into the field. One thing that I know is in this area in the Twin Cities, and unfortunately I don't know about right now during COVID, is there's some really great meetup groups, especially around data viz in the Twin Cities. I think that's a great way to meet people in the field and get to know and network. I think that would be awesome. But then also I think with data viz, similar to data science, you can build a portfolio and have that out there, and people see the type of work that you can build, and that's a great way to do it too. Let's see here. The internship from Kate here, I see the internship programs appear to only be for master's and PhD candidates. As an experienced business professional, I wish there's one for me. I know General Mills actually has a really cool internship rotational program, but it is kind of focused on people coming out of a bachelor's degree actually, which is really interesting. Sandy, do you know of any programs that are kind of more aimed for transition?
I don't.
Yeah. That is an unfortunate thing. That'd be something that, I'm hoping that if we have people from these large employers listening in on this talk, I mean, that's one of those opportunity areas where people are making career transitions, and just because they have many years of experience doesn't mean that they aren't okay in wanting to start off in those.
Yeah. I on that question about, I'm an undergraduate, where's the intern program for me? I think that, well, at least at TR, Thomson Reuters, that person would still be welcomed into the software engineering. I would go ahead and look at the software engineering internships, because they probably, if you're a big company, you're lumping all those skills together. And that's the program. It takes a lot of effort to separate software engineer undergrads from data analytics undergrads and create separate intern programs. So they were just probably gathering data analyst interns in the regular software engineering internship program. So maybe take a look at those.
Yeah, that's great advice. Shanoa has a cool question here. Soon to be graduate with a business and analytics and computational data science degree. They ask, would you recommend jumping into grad school right away or getting some job experience first, especially if I want to have a role in environmental or sustainable analytics and data science? Personally, I would almost see if you could do both at the same time. If you could get an employer to pay for your master's degree, that would be great.
And I would agree with you, Renee, and I think that a lot of graduate programs, at least the ones at St. Thomas, maybe the U of M, other places in analytics, are usually part-time for that very reason.
Yeah, I mean,
so it'll work very well.
I've worked with some amazing, there's a couple of young women that I'm thinking of in particular at General Mills who did that, where they were getting their master's degrees while working there. And they are some of the most talented young individuals that I've seen, just in terms of like, they're doing a great job. I think what's so nice about working at the same time is getting that degree at the same time is you get that experience of what you're learning and seeing it being applied at the same time and really getting both sides of that and really being able to integrate it. If you are able to do that, I highly recommend it. Let's see here. People talking about Coursera, and great. People are offering a lot of great recommendations to each other, which is really awesome. Yeah, somebody asking, they've got a BS in applied statistics with a good background in R. Would you recommend diving into the field or going to graduate school? Same advice there as above.
Yeah. Yes. There are not many people that love and enjoy R, and if you do, there's a job out there for you.
Do we have any good comprehensive resources for Tableau? I'm not sure if I know we have some data viz. I thought we had like some information in that last slide, but I personally am not a data viz person, so I don't, but I will say again, there is a great data viz meetup group in the Twin Cities that I think would definitely be able to help you out. Keeping up with data science is a daunting task, absolutely. Do you remember finding a niche of what you do best and really honing in on that? Yeah, I think a lot of people see data science as like that really, it's a field that you feel like everybody expects you to know everything all the time. And as somebody, I'm an experienced data scientist. I've, been doing this for quite a while. And, when I was recently interviewing, you go through that experience where some places just expect you to know the most obscure things that you're never actually ever going to use. And in my mind, that kind of just tells you something about the employer. But in terms of like finding something, I think, sometimes you just fall into it. So for me personally, I have a ton of experience in forecasting, right? So that's just a field that in every company needs forecasting, right? And there's so many different ways to do it, and machine learning has gotten so much better about it and different ways of doing it than what we've seen in the past for, maybe traditional statistics. So, that's definitely an area where like everybody seems to have it. You see some people who get more into like the NLP focus, and that ends up being, there's a ton of work out there. And, I think the main thing is like, know that it's okay to not know everything. The main thing is to be able to demonstrate that if you don't know something, that you are capable of learning it and that you have a passion for learning it. I'm much more okay with somebody saying, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, but them saying, this is how I would find the answer. So I think a lot of it is just kind of like, yep, finding an area that you're particularly interested in, but then also making sure you're training up on those skills that would allow you to quickly transition to something else if you needed to. Let's see here. Do you think there's an association between crafting and data analytics?
Yes. Creativity. Have to be able to think outside the box. Would you agree, Renee?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, part of it as I got into it is a great way to be able to do something that I feel like is challenging my mind and creative, but I force myself to be away from a work computer. So that's a great thing for me as well.
Right.
Some questions here. Are there any benefits to getting an advanced degree if you've been through a boot camp? I think probably depends on your experience and the boot camp. Personally, I think at a certain point, it's probably more about getting real world work experience. I don't know what you think, Sandy.
Well, I probably have a slightly different perspective just based on how long I am a lifelong learner. I've gotten certificates throughout my life, throughout my career, but I haven't spent that much time because I was working through as a team leader and delivering big projects. I didn't spend that much time keeping up on all of my technical skills. I could definitely understand and make judgment calls on technology decisions that my architects were making. No hands-on experience. So for me, going back to a master's or a graduate program to get those skills was really important. And I thought the program I was in was very, very good. I'll also tell you just from my position is that it was a lot easier to be a student after all that experience. Like, yeah, I don't really need to buy that text or read it. And hey, I didn't, and it didn't make any difference to my grades. So I do think there's a place for going back to those programs, and it just kind of depends on where you're starting from and whether there are a lot of things for you to learn.
Yeah. Got another question here. Somebody's saying here that they're an older professional with a bachelor's of mathematics and an MBA. And what recommendations would you give for them to transition into a business analyst to a data scientist role?
And you find it's interesting because you find, I don't know, Renee, if you have an opinion, but in the program I was in, I found a lot of people who are kind of in that position of going from business analyst to data analyst. It's about the data. So you need to learn SQL. You need to understand some stats and have a passion for being able to find data from multiple places to come up with a new idea or insight. You often hear insights from analytics, that phrase. So that's what I'd say you need. I think you start from this wonderful spot of understanding that a problem needs to be defined and compartmentalized, that people who have the technology skills won't necessarily understand. So I think being a business analyst sets you up very well for learning those other skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you see on the one side of the spectrum, people who, maybe have a lot of background on the more business side and are needing to learn the technology. And then you have people on the technology side who I'm just like, you need to go and we need to get you some business experience. Like it goes on both sides of the spectrum in terms of what you need to really be good at this position, and having that strong business understanding experience is awesome. If then you can then do some portfolio work to show that you're also expanding that technical side, I think makes you super appealing. I think I've actually managed to catch up on questions.
So I don't know that, well, did we have any other slides that we wanted to share? I think I'm sorry, I stopped the presentation there. It'll take me a minute to get it back. There it is.
Are there
So
any other?
the
Oh, go for it.
yeah, sorry. The only additional slides we had here were links. I'm not sure if we're, and Renee is a coordinator and Diana is, I don't know if these PowerPoints go to a certain location, but these are all links for you to peruse if you're interested in some of the programs that are here. But we've between Renee and I, we've gathered some links of peer certification programs you can look at, or data analytics programs that you can look at to consider if you want to move forward in this field.
Yeah, it's just a sampling of some of the ones that, and you've seen some of them talked about in the chat here too. And we will be sharing out the slides. We're working on that, but yes, we are planning on getting the slides shared out to everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Renee and
Okay,
Sandy,
so
wonderful
I got a question here. Opinions on the value of the U of M data visualization and analytics bootcamp versus self-learning. Sandy, I'd love to hear what you think on here too. To start, I'd say it really, I think how much you get out of a boot camp or how much you get out of self-learning really has more to do with what your investment in it and how you best learn. If you're somebody who is really self-motivated and could use those Coursera courses and actually build a real portfolio and get that out in GitHub and you can complete it in a reasonable amount of time, great. If you're somebody who needs that motivation of I paid some money for a boot camp and it's at this time and I'm going to get this done, those are great too. So that's my opinion. But Sandy, what do you think?
I think what you get out of a structured program, well, both of them are structured, right? But one of them, with a U of M's program or other graduate certificate program, you get other people to talk to bounce your ideas off of, and somebody's holding you accountable for a grade. And and the project work, the things you learn. So so my son went through some of those programs and they're very directed. There's an answer, you check your answer. There's less project work or less, like for instance, in a certificate program, you need to go out and find your data. And Kaggle was one of the sources listed, or your company, or a number of other places where you can find data and create your own program. So I feel like I get more out of a program at the U of M if you're just starting from scratch. If you want to just learn, okay, I know everything and I just need to learn SQL, then that's a good place for a boot camp. But if you're just starting from scratch in the analytics field, I'd get into a program that's going to cover more topics.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Thank you, Renee and Sandy, for the
Diana,
wonderful
you're muted.
I am.
I hear you.
Oh,
I hear
okay,
Diana.
now I can, okay, never mind.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay, I was just going to say we are at time, so I just want to thank you, both of you, and for our audience for joining with us and for all the wonderful questions. And I see we got so many questions, so I'm sure everybody's having a great time joining your session. And the next would be a break. You have a 10-minute break before joining the last two sessions of MinneWiADS. So take a break and join back with us. Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.